The crimson sun cast long shadows across the dusty main street of Great Bend, Kansas, as Nora O'Malley clutched her meager belongings against her chest. September 1877 had brought an early autumn chill, and with it, the crushing reality that she was utterly alone in a town where she knew no one. At 22, with only $5 to her name and her parents freshly buried back east, Nora had arrived on the afternoon stage with little more than hope and determination. "Miss, you planning on standing there till sundown?" The stagecoach driver's gruff voice startled her from her thoughts as he finished unloading the last of the luggage. "No, sir. I'm sorry." Nora adjusted her worn shawl and took a hesitant step forward. Her journey west had depleted nearly all her savings, but the advertisement in the newspaper had promised work at the Golden Saddle Hotel. A maid's position wasn't glamorous, but it was honest work, and Nora was nothing if not honest. The Golden Saddle stood 3 stories tall at the end of the street, its freshly painted sign swinging gently in the breeze. As Nora approached, she noticed a tall figure emerging from the hotel's double doors. He moved with the easy confidence of a man comfortable in his own skin, his broad shoulders tapering to a narrow waist. The stranger paused to light a cigarette, the brim of his hat tilted low over his face. "Excuse me," Nora called out, her voice wavering slightly. "Is this the Golden Saddle Hotel?" "I'm here about the maid position." The man turned, revealing a face weathered by sun and wind but handsome in its ruggedness. His eyes, a startling shade of blue, assessed her with interest. "It is indeed, miss. I'm Owen Navarro, foreman at the Double Cross Ranch." He tipped his hat politely. "Mrs. Patterson runs this establishment. She's inside at the front desk." "Thank you, Mr. Navarro." Nora dipped her head in acknowledgement, a strand of auburn hair escaping her simple bun. "New to Great Bend?" he asked, falling into step beside her. "Is it that obvious?" Nora smiled faintly. "We don't get many new faces, especially ones carrying their life in a carpetbag." His observation wasn't unkind, merely factual. The hotel lobby was mercifully warm, the smell of beeswax polish and fresh bread from the adjacent dining room creating a welcoming atmosphere. Behind the polished oak counter stood an older woman with silver-streaked hair pulled back in a severe bun. "Mrs. Patterson," Nora approached cautiously. "I'm Nora O'Malley. I wrote about the position you advertised in the Kansas City paper." The woman's stern expression softened slightly. "Ah, yes. You're earlier than expected. The room isn't ready yet, but we can sort that out later. Can you start immediately? My last girl ran off with a cattle buyer 3 days ago." "Yes, madam. I can start this minute if needed." Mrs. Patterson looked pleased. "Good. Room and board included plus $2 a week. Sundays off unless we have a full house." "That's very generous, thank you." From behind her, Owen Navarro cleared his throat. "Mrs. Patterson, I'll be heading back to the ranch. Please tell Mr. Patterson the boss approved his order for the month." "Of course, Owen. Give my regards to Mr. Cross." As Owen turned to leave, his eyes met Nora's briefly. "Welcome to Great Bend, Miss O'Malley. I reckon we'll be seeing more of each other." There was something in his gaze that made Nora's heart quicken, though she quickly dismissed the feeling. She had come west for a fresh start and stable employment, not to get caught up with a cowboy, no matter how compelling his blue eyes might be. The next week passed in a blur of new routines. Nora learned the rhythm of hotel life, changing linens, scrubbing floors, and serving in the dining room when needed. The work was exhausting but satisfying, and Mrs. Patterson proved to be firm but fair. On her first Sunday off, Nora decided to explore the town. Great Bend wasn't large, but it was bustling with activity. The railroad had transformed this once quiet settlement into an important shipping point for cattle. bringing cowboys, merchants, and all manner of people through its dusty streets. She was examining the window display at the general store when a familiar voice called her name. "Miss O'Malley, enjoying your day off?" Owen Navarro sat atop a magnificent chestnut gelding, looking every inch the capable ranch foreman in his worn denim, leather vest, and dusty boots. "Mr. Navarro," Nora nodded politely. "Yes, I thought I should get to know the town a bit better. Have you been to the schoolhouse yet? It's our pride and joy. Built it just last year." He gestured down the street. "I'm heading that way myself. Care to walk alongside?" Something in his easy manner made it impossible to refuse. Owen dismounted, leading his horse as they walked side by side down the wide dirt street. "What brings you all the way from the east?" he asked. "Most women don't travel west alone." "Necessity," Nora answered simply. "My parents passed within months of each other. Consumption. There was nothing left for me there but debts and memories." Owen's expression softened. "I'm sorry for your loss. That's a hard road to travel." "And you, Mr. Navarro, are you from Kansas originally?" he chuckled. "Born in Texas, raised all over. My pa was a drover before the war, then a soldier, then a drifter. I've been working cattle since I was tall enough to see over a horse's withers." They reached the modest schoolhouse, its white-painted clapboards gleaming in the afternoon sun. "It's lovely," Nora said, admiring the bell tower and neat rows of windows. "We've got about 30 children attending now. The teacher, Miss Wheeler, came from Boston last year. She's doing remarkable work." There was genuine pride in Owen's voice. "Education matters out here, maybe more than back east. Knowing your figures can mean the difference between getting cheated at market or making a fair profit." Nora felt a flush of shame creep up her neck. "I imagine so. You like to read, Miss O'Malley?" The innocent question struck her like a physical blow. She turned away, pretending to admire the schoolyard to hide her expression. "I should get back," she said abruptly. "Mrs. Patterson mentioned a guest arriving on the evening train." "Of course." If Owen was confused by her sudden change in demeanor, he didn't show it. "Perhaps I could call on you properly next Sunday. The church social is that afternoon." Against her better judgment, Nora found herself agreeing. "That would be nice, thank you." All week, Nora found her thoughts drifting to Owen. His kindness, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the gentle way he spoke of the town and its people. By the time Sunday arrived, she had changed her mind a dozen times about attending the social. In the end, her better nature won out. Owen had been nothing but a gentleman, and she couldn't be rude after accepting his invitation. She wore her best dress, a simple blue cotton that brought out the green in her eyes, and pinned her hair in a more flattering style than her usual practical bun. Owen was waiting outside the hotel, his tall frame clad in clean denims and a pressed white shirt. He'd traded his working hat for a newer one, and his boots gleamed with polish. "Miss O'Malley," he said, eyes warming with appreciation. "You look lovely." "Thank you, Mr. Navarro." "Owen, please," he said, offering his arm. "We're not so formal here in Great Bend." The church social was held in the meeting hall adjacent to the white steepled church. Long tables laden with food lined one wall, while a small group of musicians tuned up in the corner. It seemed the entire town had turned out, from the youngest babes in arms to the oldest grandparents. Owen Navarro, a plump woman in her 50s, waved them over. "Don't you look handsome today? And who's this pretty young thing?" "Mrs. Miller, this is Miss Nora O'Malley. She's working at the Golden Saddle now." "Nora, this is Mrs. Miller, our unofficial town historian and the best baker west of the Mississippi." "Flatterer," Mrs. Miller said, but she looked pleased. "Miss O'Malley, you must try my apple pie before these vultures devour it all." The afternoon passed pleasantly as Owen introduced Nora to what seemed like every resident of Great Bend. She met the town doctor, the blacksmith and his wife, the mayor and his family, and countless others whose names blurred together. Overwhelmed, Owen asked as they took a moment's respite at a quiet table. "A bit," Nora admitted. "Everyone's been very welcoming, though. Small towns have long memories and quick judgments, but Great Bend's a good place. Folks look out for each other here." The musicians struck up a lively tune, and several couples moved to the cleared space in the center of the room. "Would you care to dance?" Owen stood and extended his hand. Nora hesitated only briefly before placing her hand in his. His palm was warm and calloused, a working man's hand, but his touch was gentle as he led her to the dance floor. The dance was simple, nothing like the formal balls she'd occasionally attended back east, but there was joy in its simplicity. Owen moved with surprising grace for such a tall man, guiding her through the steps with confidence. "You're a fine dancer, Miss O'Malley," he said, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "My mother insisted I learn. She said a lady should know how to dance properly." "Your mother was a wise woman." As the music slowed, Owen's hand at the small of her back drew her slightly closer. Nora felt a flutter in her chest, a warning that this handsome cowboy might become more than a Sunday afternoon's diversion if she wasn't careful. When the song ended, Nora excused herself to get some fresh air. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the churchyard as she leaned against a maple tree, gathering her thoughts. "Not enjoying yourself?" Owen's voice startled her. "I am," she assured him. "It's just been a while since I've been to anything like this." Owen studied her face. "Something's troubling you, though. Have I offended you somehow?" "No, not at all. You've been nothing but kind." Nora sighed, knowing she was being poor company. "It's just, there are things about me you don't know, things that would change your opinion of me." "Try me," he said simply. The moment stretched between them, fragile as spun glass. Nora looked into his open, honest face and made a decision. "I can't raid," she confessed in shame, the words barely audible even to her own ears. "Not properly, anyway." Owen was silent for so long that Nora feared the worst. When she finally gathered the courage to meet his eyes, she was surprised to find no judgment there. "That's what had you so troubled?" he asked gently. It's not something I'm proud of. My father thought education was wasted on girls. I know my letters and simple words, but anything more complex." She shook her head. "Back home, people would have laughed or pitied me." The cowboy smiled, and it was like the sun breaking through clouds. "I'll teach you every night," he said simply. "If you want to learn, that is." Nora stared at him. "You do that. Why?" "Because everyone deserves the chance to read the world's stories for themselves." He shrugged, as if offering to teach a grown woman to read was the most natural thing in the world. "Besides, I like your company, Miss O'Malley. This gives me an excuse to see more of you." For the first time since arriving in Great Bend, Nora felt a spark of genuine hope. "I'd like that very much, Owen." Their first lesson began the following evening. Mrs. Patterson, upon hearing of the arrangement, offered them the use of a small parlor off the hotel dining room after the evening meal was cleared away. "It's not charity," Owen explained when Nora tried to offer payment. "My mother taught me that knowledge shared is knowledge multiplied." He had brought a primer typically used for children, but he'd covered the childish illustrations with paper to spare her pride. "Let's start with what you know," he suggested, spreading the book open between them. Nora hesitantly pointed out the letters she recognized, stumbling through simple words. Owen was patient, never showing frustration when she struggled or embarrassment when she made mistakes. "You're doing wonderfully," he encouraged. "You already know more than you think." Their lessons quickly became the highlight of Nora's days. Owen would arrive after his work at the ranch, sometimes still dusty from the day's labor, but always with the same warm smile and encouraging words. As autumn deepened, so did their connection. Their conversations extended beyond reading lessons, touching on childhood memories, hopes for the future, and the daily rhythms of life in Great Bend. One evening in late October, as frost painted delicate patterns on the window panes, Owen arrived with something hidden behind his back. "I have a surprise," he announced, looking pleased with himself. "What is it?" Nora asked, setting aside the handkerchief she'd been mending. Owen produced a slim volume bound in blue cloth. "It's a book of poetry by Emily Dickinson. The verses are short but beautiful. I thought it might be something you'd enjoy working toward." The thoughtfulness of the gift brought unexpected tears to Nora's eyes. "That's the nicest thing anyone's done for me in a very long time." "Don't cry," he said softly, reaching out to catch a tear with his thumb. The gesture was intimate, his hand lingering against her cheek longer than strictly necessary. "I just thought you might like having your own book." "I do." "I will." Nora took a deep breath, steadying herself. "Shall we begin tonight's lesson?" But that night, the usual comfortable atmosphere was charged with something new. Owen sat closer than usual, his sleeve occasionally brushing against hers as he leaned in to help with a difficult word. Nora found herself acutely aware of his nearness, the clean soap smell of him mingling with leather and the outdoors. "You're distracted tonight," he observed after she'd made the same mistake 3 times in a row. "I'm sorry," she said, feeling heat rise in her cheeks. "Don't apologize." "I find myself distracted too." His voice had dropped to a lower register. Not by the words on the page, though. The moment hung between them, ripe with possibility. Owen's gaze dropped to her lips, and Nora felt herself leaning imperceptibly closer. The parlor door suddenly swung open as Mrs. Patterson bustled in with a tray of tea and cookies. "Thought you two might need some refreshment," she announced, setting the tray down with a knowing look. "Don't mind me, just being hospitable." The moment broken, Owen cleared his throat and shifted back to a more appropriate distance. "Thank you, Mrs. Patterson, that's very kind." When the older woman had gone, leaving the door pointedly ajar, they exchanged a glance that dissolved into quiet laughter. "I think we're being chaperoned," Owen whispered. "It seems that way," Nora agreed, still flushed. "Perhaps we should return to our lesson." As the weeks passed, Nora's reading improved steadily. By mid-November, she could read simple sentences with only occasional help, an achievement that filled her with pride. "You're a natural," Owen told her one evening as they finished a particularly successful lesson. "You just needed someone to believe in you." Outside, the first heavy snow of winter was falling, transforming Great Bend into a landscape of white. The hotel was quiet, most guests having retired early. "May I walk you up to your room?" Owen asked as they gathered their books. "That's not necessary, it's just upstairs." "I insist, it's what a gentleman would do." They climbed the stairs in comfortable silence. At her door, Nora turned to thank him for another lesson, only to find him standing closer than expected. "Nora," he began, his voice husky, "I've been thinking." "Yes. The Christmas dance is in 3 weeks. Would you do me the honor of attending with me, not just as friends, but, well, as something more?" The request was formal, old-fashioned even, but it made Nora's heart race all the same. "I'd like that very much," she answered honestly. Owen's smile was brilliant. He took her hand, raising it slowly to his lips to press a gentle kiss against her knuckles. "Good night, then. Sweet dreams." "Good night, Owen." Nora closed her door and leaned against it, a smile spreading across her face. For the first time in longer than she could remember, she felt hope blooming for a future brighter than her past. The following week brought changes to the routine. A heavy snowstorm kept Owen at the ranch for 3 days, tending to cattle and repairing damage to the bunkhouse roof. When he finally made it to town, he looked exhausted but determined not to miss their lesson. "You should rest," Nora insisted, taking in his tired eyes and the slump of his shoulders. "And miss seeing you. Not a chance." He smiled, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Though I admit I might not be the best teacher tonight." "Then let me read to you instead," she suggested impulsively. Owen's eyebrows rose in surprise. "You do that. It won't be perfect," Nora warned. "But I've been practicing." She took out the primer and opened to a page she'd been studying on her own. Slowly, carefully, she began to read a simple story about a farm. She stumbled over several words and had to pause frequently, but she made it through 2 full pages before looking up. Owen was watching her with an expression of such tenderness it made her breath catch. "That was wonderful," he said softly. "I'm so proud of you, Nora." No one had ever spoken those words to her before. The realization sent a wave of emotion through her so powerful she had to blink back tears. "Thank you for teaching me," she said simply, "for believing I could learn. I believe you can do anything you set your mind to." He reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "You're the strongest woman I've ever known." As December progressed, Great Bend transformed for the holidays. Pine boughs and red ribbons adorned storefronts, and the church organized caroling groups that traveled from house to house in the evenings. Owen continued the reading lessons, but their time together increasingly included walks through town, meals at the hotel dining room, and once, a sleigh ride through the snow-covered countryside. They were careful to maintain propriety. Mrs. Patterson saw to that, but it was clear to everyone in Great Bend that Owen Navarro was courting Nora O'Malley in earnest. The night of the Christmas dance arrived with perfect winter weather, crisp, clear, and just cold enough to make the heated town hall feel welcoming. Nora had splurged on fabric for a new dress, a deep green wool that Mrs. Patterson helped her sew in the evenings. Owen arrived to escort her wearing a new black suit, his hair freshly trimmed. The sight of him standing in the hotel lobby, hat in hand and nervousness evident in his stance, made Nora's heart turn over. "You look beautiful," he said, his voice reverent. "You're quite handsome yourself," she replied, accepting his offered arm. The town hall had been transformed with evergreen branches, paper stars, and dozens of candles. A table groaned under the weight of Christmas treats, and a small orchestra played cheerful tunes in the corner. "Everyone staring," Nora whispered as they entered. "Let them," Owen replied, his hand covering hers where it rested on his arm. "They're just jealous that I'm escorting the prettiest woman in Kansas." They danced every dance together, from lively reels to slow waltzes. During one particularly romantic piece, Owen held her closer than was strictly proper, his cheek nearly touching her hair. "I have something to ask you," he murmured, his breath warm against her ear. "Not here, though, after the dance." Nora's pulse quickened. "Is everything all right?" "Everything is perfect," he assured her, spinning her gently as the music swelled. As the evening drew to a close, Owen led her outside to a bench beneath a snow-dusted pine tree. The stars above were brilliant in the clear winter sky, and their breath formed white clouds in the cold air. "I've been thinking about the future," Owen began, turning to face her on the bench. "My future, our future if you'll have me." Nora felt dizzy with anticipation. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that these past months have been the happiest of my life. Teaching you to read has been a joy, but it's just a small part of what we've shared." He took both her hands in his. "I'm saying that I love you, Nora O'Malley. I've loved you since that day at the church social when you trusted me with your secret." "Owen," she breathed, her heart so full she could barely speak. "Let me finish," he said gently. "I know this is fast by Eastern standards anyway, but out here we don't waste time when we know what we want." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet pouch. "I'm asking if you'll be my wife." From the pouch, he produced a simple gold band with a small pearl set in the center. "It was my mother's," he explained. "Pa gave it to me before he died, said to save it for a woman with courage and heart." Tears spilled down Nora's cheeks, freezing on her lashes in the cold air. "Are you sure? I'm still learning to read. I don't have a dowry or family connections. I'm sure about you," Owen interrupted, his voice steady. "The rest is just details. Do you love me, Nora?" "Yes," she answered without hesitation. "More than I thought possible." "Then will you marry me, be my wife, build a life with me here in Great Bend?" "Yes," Nora said again, joy bubbling up inside her like a spring. "Yes, I'll marry you." Owen slipped the ring onto her finger, then cupped her face in his hands and kissed her. It was their first kiss, sweet and tender, a promise of the life they would build together. News of their engagement spread through Great Bend like wildfire. Mrs. Patterson insisted on hosting a small celebration at the hotel the following evening, where Nora was touched by the genuine warmth and acceptance shown by the townsfolk who had become her friends. "When's the wedding to be?" Mrs. Miller asked, cornering them by the punch bowl. Owen looked at Nora. "We were thinking spring once the worst of winter has passed." "Nonsense," Mrs. Patterson interjected. "Why wait? The preacher's right here in town and the hotel dining room can be cleared for a proper reception. Next Saturday would be perfect." Nora's eyes widened. "So soon?" "Unless you want a fancy Eastern affair," Owen asked, suddenly uncertain. "I didn't think." "No," Nora said quickly. "Next Saturday would be wonderful. I don't need anything elaborate. I just didn't realize it could happen so quickly." And so the plans were made. The women of Great Bend rallied around Nora, offering to help with everything from flowers to food. Mrs. Miller promised her famous wedding cake, while the dressmaker offered to alter an elegant white dress that had been commissioned, but never claimed. "A town wedding," Owen mused as they walked back to the hotel that night. "Are you sure you're not disappointed? Most girls dream of something grander." "Most girls haven't had their dreams come true the way mine have," Nora replied, squeezing his arm. "All I want is to be your wife. The rest is just decoration." The week passed in a whirlwind of preparations. Despite the winter weather, ranchers and townspeople alike planned to attend, making it one of the largest social events Great Bend had seen in years. The evening before the wedding, Owen came for their regular reading lesson, though both were too excited to focus much on the words. "This will be our last lesson as teacher and student," he noted, watching her trace a finger along a line of text. "Tomorrow you'll be my wife." "Does that mean the lessons stop?" Nora asked, looking up. "Not if you don't want them to. I'll teach you as long as you want to learn." He hesitated, then added, "There's something else I've been meaning to tell you. I've been saving for years, and last month I put down money on a piece of land about 2 miles outside of town." "Your own ranch?" Nora asked, surprised. "It's small, just 80 acres, but the soil's good and there's a creek running through it. The house needs work, but it's solid, I thought. Well, I hoped we could make it our home." He looked uncertain for the first time since she'd known him. "It's not the double cross or anything grand." "It sounds perfect," Nora assured him, her heart swelling with love for this man who worked so hard and dreamed so earnestly. "When can I see it?" "I'll take you there after the wedding. It's my gift to you, our own place. I've been riding out there every chance I get, fixing things up." "That's why you've been so tired some evenings," Nora realized. "I thought it was just ranch work." Owen shrugged, looking a bit sheepish. "I wanted it to be a surprise. It still needs a woman's touch, but I've repaired the roof and floors, replaced some windows. There's a good spot for a garden come spring. The image of their life together, a small ranch, a garden, a home filled with love, and someday, children, filled Nora with contentment. How far she'd come from that frightened young woman who'd stepped off the stagecoach just months ago. "I can't wait to see it," she said honestly. "To make it ours." Their wedding day dawned clear and cold, with sunlight sparkling off fresh snow. Nora dressed in the altered white gown which fit as if made for her. Mrs. Patterson helped arrange her hair, tucking sprigs of pine and holly among the auburn curls. "You look lovely, my dear," the older woman said, her usual briskness softened with emotion. "I'm right proud of you, coming all this way alone, making a place for yourself. Owen's a fortunate man." "I'm the fortunate one," Nora replied, smoothing the satin of her borrowed gown. "When I arrived here, I never imagined finding someone like him." The hotel dining room had been transformed. Tables pushed against the walls held platters of food, while chairs had been arranged in neat rows facing an archway decorated with evergreens and red ribbons. Every seat was filled, with late arrivals standing along the back wall. When Nora entered on the arm of Dr. Lewis, who had kindly offered to give her away, a collective murmur of appreciation rippled through the crowd. But Nora had eyes only for Owen, who stood waiting for her beneath the arch, his expression one of pure adoration. The ceremony itself was brief but heartfelt. They exchanged vows in clear voices, promising to love and cherish each other through whatever life might bring. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Owen kissed her with such tenderness that several of the ladies present dabbed at their eyes. The celebration that followed was joyous, with music and dancing lasting well into the evening. Finally, as the last guests departed with well wishes and knowing smiles, Owen took Nora's hand. "Ready to see our home, Mrs. Navarro?" The title sent a thrill through her. "I am, Mr. Navarro." A sleigh waited outside, decorated with ribbons and bells, pulled by Owen's faithful gelding. He helped Nora in, tucking warm buffalo robes around her before climbing in himself. "It's not far," he promised as they glided through the moonlit night, the runners making a soft, shushing sound against the snow. They passed through town and out along a country road lined with bare trees. After a short while, Owen turned the sleigh onto a narrower track that wound up a gentle slope. "There," he said softly as they crested the hill. "That's our place." In the moonlight, Nora could make out the silhouette of a modest farmhouse nestled against a stand of trees. Smoke curled from the chimney and warm light glowed from the windows. "You've been here today?" she asked, surprised. "I asked Jake from the ranch to come by and light the fires, so it would be warm for us." Owen guided the sleigh to a small barn beside the house. "It's not much yet, but come spring, we'll plant those gardens, maybe add a room or two." After settling the horse, Owen swept Nora into his arms to carry her across the threshold. She laughed, throwing her arms around his neck as he pushed the door open with his foot. Inside, the house was simple but charming. A fire crackled in the stone hearth, casting golden light across wooden floors that had been recently sanded and polished. A table and chairs stood in the kitchen area, while a comfortable-looking settee faced the fireplace. Through an open door, Nora glimpsed a bedroom with a large brass bed covered in what looked like a handmade quilt. "Welcome home," Owen said, setting her gently on her feet. "What do you think?" Nora turned in a slow circle, taking in the home that would be theirs. There were signs of Owen's hard work everywhere: fresh paint on the walls, new curtains at the windows, shelves built into a corner nook. "It's wonderful," she said honestly. "Absolutely perfect." Owen looked relieved. "I wasn't sure if it would be enough after what you might be used to back east." "This is better than anything I've ever had," Nora assured him, moving to touch the smooth wood of the table. "Because it's ours. Because we'll build our life here together." He came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her head. "I promise you, Nora, I'll work every day to make you happy here." She turned in his embrace, reaching up to touch his face. "I already am happy. Happier than I ever thought possible." Their kiss was deeper than those they'd shared before, filled with promise and longing. When they finally parted, both were breathing faster. "I have one more surprise for you," Owen said, taking her hand and leading her to the shelves in the corner. "A wedding gift." The shelves, she now saw, held books, at least 24 volumes of various sizes. "I've been collecting them," Owen explained. "Some from the Mercantile, others ordered from Kansas City. I thought we could read them together. And someday to our children." Tears welled in Nora's eyes as she ran her fingers along the spines. "Owen, they're beautiful, thank you." "Would you like to try one now?" he asked. "Just a page or two," Nora nodded, selecting a slim volume of poetry, the Emily Dickinson he'd given her weeks earlier. They settled on the settee before the fire, and she opened to a page marked with a ribbon. Slowly, carefully, she began to read aloud. "Hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul, and sings the tune without the words, and never stops at all." She stumbled over perches and had to sound out without syllable by syllable, but she made it through the verse. When she looked up, Owen was watching her with such pride and love it made her heart ache with happiness. "That was perfect," he said softly. "Just perfect." Later, as they lay together in the brass bed, the fire burning low in the grate, Nora rested her head on Owen's chest and listened to the steady beating of his heart. "I never thought I'd find someone who would accept me as I am," she confessed in the darkness. "Who wouldn't think less of me for what I couldn't do." Owen's hand stroked through her hair, gentle and soothing. "There's nothing about you that could make me love you less. Your courage in coming west alone, your determination to learn, your kindness to everyone you meet. Those are the things that matter. Still, I want to keep learning. I want to be able to read to our children someday to help with their lessons." "And you will," he promised. "We have all the time in the world now." As winter gave way to spring, Nora and Owen settled into life on their small ranch. True to her word, Nora continued her reading lessons, progressing to more complex texts under Owen's patient guidance. By summer, she could read simple newspaper articles and write clear, if basic, letters. Owen worked alongside the hands at the double cross during the day, returning home each evening to tend their own growing herd of cattle and the vegetable garden Nora had planted. They added chickens, 2 milk cows, and a pair of pigs to their holdings. The house expanded to a larger kitchen, a second bedroom, and a covered porch where they could sit on summer evenings and watch the sun set over their land. Owen built shelves for their growing collection of books, and Nora hung curtains she'd sewn herself at the windows. Great Bend was growing as well. The railroad brought more settlers, more commerce, and a sense of permanence to what had once been a frontier town. Nora maintained her friendship with Mrs. Patterson and other townspeople, often bringing eggs and vegetables to trade at the hotel. In the fall, just as they celebrated their first anniversary, Nora shared news that filled Owen with joy. They would be welcoming a child in the spring. "A son," Owen predicted, his hand gentle on her still flat stomach, "with his mother's brains and determination." "Or a daughter," Nora countered with a smile, "with her father's kindness and patience." Either way, they agreed. The child would grow up knowing the value of education and the power of believing in oneself. The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the winter months. Nora continued to read every night, now often aloud to the child growing within her. Sometimes she read poetry, other times stories from the newspaper or passages from the Bible. Our baby will be the most well-read child in Kansas before it's even born, Owen joked one evening as they sat by the fire, Nora's voice soft as she read from Little Women, a Christmas gift Owen had ordered specially. March 1879 brought unusually heavy rains, turning the roads to mud and swelling the creek that ran through their property to twice its normal width. Owen worried about Nora traveling into town so close to her time, so they stayed close to home, preparing the nursery and enjoying their last quiet days before the baby's arrival. The labor began on a stormy night in early April. Owen had to ride through the downpour to fetch the midwife from town, returning drenched but determined to be at Nora's side throughout the ordeal. After 14 hours, just as dawn was breaking, their son entered the world with a lusty cry that made both parents laugh through their tears. "He's perfect," Owen whispered, cradling the tiny bundle against his chest. 10 fingers, 10 toes, and your beautiful eyes. "And your strong chin," Nora added, exhausted but radiant. "What shall we name him?" They had discussed various options, but now, looking at their son's face, Owen knew exactly the right name. "Benjamin," he said. "It means son of my right hand or son of the south, since he was born as the sun rose in the southern sky." "Benjamin Navarro," Nora tested the name. "I love it." Benjamin Owen Navarro. The baby seemed to approve, his tiny fist waving as if in agreement. Life with an infant transformed their routine, but in ways that brought them closer. Owen often took Benjamin with him in a sling while he worked around the property, telling his son about the cattle, the land, the sky overhead. Nora would sit on the porch in the evenings, reading aloud while she nursed, determined that her son would grow up surrounded by words and stories. As Benjamin grew from infant to toddler, the ranch prospered as well. Owen's careful management and hard work paid off in a growing herd and expanded acreage. By the time their son was walking, they had added a proper barn, a larger corral, and were considering hiring help for the busier seasons. Their neighbors spoke admiringly of the Navarro place, always neat, with flourishing gardens, healthy livestock, and that special warmth that comes from a truly happy home. Some credited Owen's business sense, others Nora's dedication, but those who knew them best understood it was the partnership between them that made everything work so harmoniously. When Benjamin was 3, a daughter joined their family, Sarah Elizabeth, named for both grandmothers neither child would ever meet. She had Owen's blue eyes and a cap of dark curls that soon grew into ringlets that bounced when she toddled after her brother. The children thrived in the freedom of country living, but education remained paramount in the Navarro household. Before Benjamin was old enough for the town school, Nora taught him his letters and numbers at the kitchen table. By the time he started formal schooling at 6, he could already read simple books on his own. "You're a natural teacher," Owen told Nora proudly after watching her work patiently with Sarah on recognizing letters. "Maybe even better than I was." "I had an excellent example," she replied with a smile, "and a very personal understanding of how it feels not to know something everyone else seems to take for granted." As the children grew, so did Great Bend. By 1887, the town boasted a larger school, a proper hotel, though the Golden Saddle still thrived under Mrs. Patterson's management, and even a small library. When the town council decided to seek a librarian, many were surprised when Nora Navarro applied for the position. "Are you sure?" Owen asked when she told him of her plans. "You've never worked outside our home since we married." "The children are in school most of the day now," Nora explained, "and it would only be 3 days a week. Mrs. Miller has already volunteered to cover the other days. If it's what you want, I support you completely, Owen assured her. I just never thought you'd want to leave the ranch. It's not about leaving, Nora said, taking his hand. It's about giving back. Think of how many people in this town might never have learned to read if someone hadn't taken the time to teach them. I want to be that person for others. The town council, impressed by Nora's passion and her own story of learning to read as an adult, offered her the position without hesitation. 3 days a week, she rode into town to oversee the modest collection of books, helping patrons find what they needed and organizing reading groups for both children and adults. Her adult reading circle became particularly popular. Immigrants newly arrived in the area, older ranchers who'd never had schooling, and young women who, like Nora herself, had been denied education, all found their way to the library on Tuesday afternoons. You found your calling, Owen observed one evening as they sat on their porch, watching the sunset after a particularly rewarding day at the library. Benjamin, now 10, was teaching 7-year-old Sarah to play checkers in the yard, their laughter carrying on the gentle breeze. I think I have, Nora agreed, though my first calling will always be here, with you and the children. Owen took her hand, his thumb rubbing over the simple gold band he'd placed there nearly a decade ago. Do you ever regret it? Coming west, marrying a dusty cowboy, living on a ranch in Kansas instead of in some eastern city. Nora leaned her head against his shoulder. Not for a single moment. Everything I value in my life came from that decision. You, our children, our home, even my ability to read. How could I regret any of it? Even when I track mud into your clean kitchen or forget to mend the fence like I promised, she laughed. Even then, though I reserve the right to remind you about that fence until it's fixed. As the children grew into teenagers, the Navarro Ranch expanded into one of the more successful operations in the county. Owen's innovative approach to breeding cattle and managing the land earned respect throughout Kansas, while Nora's work at the library and with the school board made her a valued member of the community. Benjamin, serious and thoughtful like his father, showed a gift for working with horses that suggested his future might lie in training rather than ranching. Sarah, with her quick mind and love of stories, devoured books at a pace that astonished even her well-read parents. She might be a teacher someday, Owen mused as they watched their daughter reading to a group of younger children at a church picnic, or a writer herself. Whatever they choose to be, Nora said, they'll have the foundation to succeed. That's all we can give them. In the autumn of 1892, as Great Bend celebrated its incorporation as a proper city, the Navarro family marked a more personal milestone. Owen and Nora had been married for 15 years. Their small ranch had grown into a respectable spread of 300 acres, and Benjamin was preparing to attend agricultural college in Manhattan, Kansas, the first in either family to pursue higher education. The night before his departure, the family gathered around the fireplace in the home that had expanded over the years, but remained the heart of their lives together. I'm going to miss this, Benjamin admitted, looking around at the familiar walls lined with books, the comfortable furniture worn smooth by years of use, the faces of those he loved most in the world. I've never been away from home before. Home will always be here, Owen assured him, his hair now streaked with silver but his eyes as bright and kind as ever. And so will we. And you'll write to us every week, Nora added. Tell us everything you're learning. Sarah, at 14 already showing signs of the beauty she would become, leaned against her brother's shoulder. I'm going to read all your books while you're gone, she threatened. Even the boring ones about cattle breeding. You're welcome to them, Benjamin laughed. Just don't touch my journals." Later that night, after the children had gone to bed, Nora and Owen sat alone by the dying fire, sharing a rare moment of quiet together. "I can hardly believe our son is going to college," Nora said softly. "Sometimes it seems like just yesterday that you were teaching me to read in that little parlor at the Golden Saddle. And now you're teaching others," Owen said, his arm around her shoulders. "Life has a way of coming full circle. Do you remember what you told me that day at the church social?" Nora asked, looking up at the man who had been her partner in all things for 15 years. "When I confessed I couldn't read," Owen smiled, the firelight catching the laugh lines around his eyes. "I said I'd teach you every night." "And you did," Nora said simply. "You kept that promise, and every other one you've made to me." "It was the easiest promise I ever kept," Owen replied, bending to kiss her softly. "Loving you, teaching you, building this life together, it's been my greatest joy." Outside, the Kansas wind whispered through the cottonwoods that had grown tall around their home. Inside, surrounded by books and memories and the deep peace of a life well lived, Nora and Owen Navarro held each other close, grateful for the journey that had brought them together, and the stories, both those on pages and the one they'd written with their lives that they'd shared along the way. As years passed, and their children built lives of their own, Benjamin taking over most of the ranch operations while Sarah, after college in St. Louis, returned to Great Bend to teach at the school, Nora and Owen found new rhythms in their partnership. They traveled occasionally, seeing parts of the country they'd only read about. They welcomed grandchildren, teaching them to ride horses and read books with the same patience they'd shown their own children, and every night without fail, they read together. Sometimes it was the newspaper, discussing world events as they rocked side by side on the porch. Other times it was poetry or novels, taking turns reading aloud as they had since those first lessons in the hotel parlor. On their 30th anniversary, celebrated with family and half the town in attendance, Owen presented Nora with a special gift, a journal bound in soft leather, its pages filled with his handwriting. "What's this?" she asked, opening it carefully. "Our story," he explained. "From the day you stepped off that stagecoach to now. I've been working on it for years." Nora traced her finger over the first lines. "The moment I saw her, standing alone on that dusty street with nothing but a carpetbag and determination, I knew my life was about to change. What I couldn't have known was how completely she would transform not just my future, but my understanding of what truly matters in this world." Tears filled her eyes as she looked up at the man who had loved her through 3 decades of joys and sorrows, triumphs and challenges. "Thank you," she whispered, "for writing our story, for living it with me." "The story isn't over yet," Owen reminded her, his smile as warm as it had been when he first offered to teach a shame-faced young woman to read. "We still have chapters to write together." And they did, day by day, year by year, building a legacy of love, learning, and the profound power of believing in someone else's potential, a story that would be told in Great Bend for generations to come.